Hi everyone, and welcome to this video on the reading of texts. Now, in media studies, a text can be anything. It can be a billboard, a TV show, an advertisement, a radio ad, or a movie, and most commonly we talk about movies. The idea of reading in that case isn't literally reading. It's understanding through constructing the meaning. If you don't know what that means, take a look at our previous video on audience theories and you'll get some idea of how we construct meanings of texts. When we talk about reading a film, it's how do we interpret it? How do we make sense of it? How do we interpret its meaning? And so a reading of a film or a text is the interpretation of the meaning of that film. The reading may or may not be what the maker of the film intended. The whole idea is that you bring your own ideas to a text, and what you understand, your background, etc., changes the way you understand a text. So most media is intended to have a particular meaning. This is the producer or the director's dominant or intended meaning. A dominant or intended meaning is the key one that they're trying to get across. It's the moral, it's the message, it's what they were trying to get into your head to start with. Other readings, based on your or others' own experiences, are what we call variant readings, or in some cases, oppositional readings. It may be that your reading of a film totally opposes the dominant reading that the director intended, in which case an oppositional reading opposes the dominant reading of a text. Surprise! So readings can be of many, many different types, and what we're going to do in this presentation today is I'm quickly going to go through a number of different types of reading so you can get an understanding of what they are and how they work. So we've got author, director, genre, technical readings, representational readings, stylistic readings, narrative readings, cultural readings, gender readings, psychological readings, political readings, historical readings, and semiotic readings. So an author or director reading. An author is a director who makes art, and this is a term that we use for filmmakers who have a particular style in all of their films. And as much as I hate to say it, I have put in a picture there of Michael Bay and his Transformers films, because he's got a particular style of explodey child films. You know, they're designed for people with small brains who like big explosions every 30 seconds. So it's a very subjective term. Auteur doesn't just mean, you know, a director who makes high art. It can mean low art as well. And it says that directors shape things based on their interests, their beliefs, their point of view. And if you look at groups of their works together, you'll find patterns and similarities. So, for example, 1970s to 1980s Steven Spielberg, his big themes were wonder and childhood and escapism in films like E.T. Michael Bay, his Transformers films, for example, he deals in war, explosions, bimbos, and warriors. Christopher Nolan likes films you have to solve. Memento, the Dark Knight films. The Prestige and Inception are all films that you have to solve to make sense of them. Guillermo del Toro deals in nightmares and fantasies, and so Pan's Labyrinth, I've got a picture of there from Pan's Labyrinth. He likes to deal in films that create a dark, twisted fairy tale in reality. Genre readings are based on the conventions of a genre. How well does the film fit the genre? Does it challenge the genre? Why does it mean what it means because of the genre? And a classic example for this is westerns. Originally, westerns were the adventure films. They were the films you went to if you wanted a bit of escapism, watching a hero being a modern knight. And that's, you know, sort of 1950s, 1960s version of westerns. In the late 60s, early 70s, they turned into action films with The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Magnificent Seven, and so forth. They became action films that you went to for a thrill. They then changed in the spaghetti westerns in the 70s with The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, and others, into fantasy. Films that didn't actually resemble reality at all. And then finally, In the 90s, we had Unforgiven, and Unforgiven were direct challenges to all was a direct challenge to all the previous westerns. It was like, here's the historical accurate western, and it then completely challenges all those adventure ideas and action ideas, because it turns out that, you know, being a gunslinger in the Wild West was a horrible experience where you were frequently at risk and probably going to die. So it a genre reading allows you to compare with other films in a genre and say, how well does it fit? How does it challenge? Does it fit in with what we already understand? Technical readings consider the use of technology and use of particular production technology, and how the use of the technology changes the film. And the classic examples for this are 3D in Life of Pi, or even Avatar, where the 3D changes the meaning of the film. In both Life of Pi and Avatar, as they enter these fantastical worlds, the colors become brighter and the 3D becomes brighter. It's exactly the same technique they used in The Wizard of Oz. In The Wizard of Oz, in the real world, Dorothy's world is black and white. When she crosses over into Oz, the land of the wizard, everything's in bright Technicolor and ultra widescreen. So you can use technical effects to heighten reality or to heighten the drama. HFR 3D, high frame rate 3D in The Hobbit, makes things realer than we're used to in the movies. It makes the images really pop out of screen, creates a fantasy world that looks even more real than reality. And then most recently, motion capture in the new Planet of the Apes films is creating a totally believable reality in a way that we never believed the people in monkey suits in the 1969 version of Planet of the Apes. So the use of the technical features creates a new set of meaning in the films. Representational readings look at the representation of ideas, and it changes how we think about groups, and that could be ethnic groups, age groups, countries, groups that hold particular beliefs, political groups, social groups, and genders. Disney princesses are a classic case for this. Disney princesses are never fat. They're never ugly. They're never anything less than perfect. And so that changes how young girls think about women, and think about what it is to be a role model. Apu in The Simpsons creates a knowledge of Indian culture for Americans who have no knowledge of Indian culture. Does it create an accurate understanding of Indian culture? Hell no. But that's not the point of it. The point of it is to we consider the representation that it creates in people's mind. 1970s, I've put in a couple of 1970s examples there. Coffee and Black Dynamite, both examples of blaxploitation films of the 70s and 80s. Films that were designed to create I don't know whether you'd call it an homage, a tribute to black culture, or to challenge what we think as being good and positive about black role models. Stylistic readings. Stylistic readings focus on the style and the design of films. Gattaca. The meaning of Gattaca is enhanced when you think of everything in Gattaca being sterile, clean, and empty, and inhuman. You know, a perfect world filled with perfect people has no soul. Wes Anderson's films are mirror images, but they're weird, they're off-kilter. Nothing in the real world is as symmetrical and perfectly balanced as it is in a Wes Anderson film. Stanley Kubrick films were always perfectly laid out around the center of the frame. They were ordered, they were balanced, they were focused, and so whenever he presented things that weren't ordered, balanced, and focused, the meaning of the film changed. Narrative readings look at the order and style of storytelling. So we could have stories that are told the whole way straight through, or they could be disrupted, or they could be chronological, or they could be disordered. And some examples of this: Memento is told backwards. It changes the way we think about the story. I have a DVD of Memento where the film is told in order from the beginning to the end, and it's the most boring film imaginable. But when you watch the actual proper film version of Memento, it's told backwards in 5-minute chunks, and it changes the meaning of the film. Mulholland Drive the entire film is from the point of view of a character who's insane. How do you know what's real and how do you know what's not? Instead, you just have to go with what she perceives and try and understand and make meaning of what's going on. The Sixth Sense, for anybody who hasn't seen it, it has a really giant twist, and the twist happens in the last 5 minutes of the film. And I'm not going to tell you what the twist is, I don't want to spoil it, but once you understand that twist, the entire meaning of the film changes. Inception, how do you know what's real? The layers of dreams create different layers of reality. And Boyhood, completely straight. The film follows somebody growing up for 12 years with no little sign saying next year or next summer. Instead, it just carries on through his life, and you watch the character of Mason growing up over a series of 12 years. There's no story, it's just a series of events. That narrative creates a different style film. Cultural readings say that different films will have different meanings to different cultures or different cultural backgrounds. If you have a different ethnic background, you will understand a film differently. If you have a different historical, religious, subcultural background, you'll understand things differently. So if you understand gang culture in New Zealand, Once Warriors will have a different meaning to you. If you understand skinhead culture in in Australia, Romper Stomper will have a different meaning to you. If you understand Aborigine culture, the comedy 10 Canoes will have meaning for you. And if you understand Bollywood culture, the whole idea of Bollywood films will make sense to you in a way that I find completely bewildering to me as somebody with no background in them. Gender readings. If we consider the different representations of gender, of sexuality, of who's dominant in a film, then we get different meanings. So we can have feminist meanings that focus on women and women's roles. We can have masculine readings that focus on the role of men. You can have lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transsexual meanings. And then you can have straight or homophobic readings. Depending on whether you do a gay reading or a straight reading, Brokeback Mountain and The Expendables have very, very different meanings. Thelma and Louise, you can read from a feminist perspective or from a very male perspective. Good Will Hunting is entirely about guys. So if you read it from a male perspective or from a female perspective, you see very different films. And The Hunger Games, you have a female hero who does wonderful things by blowing things up and acting like a man the whole time. Is that a reasonable representation of what it is to be a female hero or not? Is that a male version of what it is to be a female hero? Psychological readings consider the mind and psychological states. They're often looked at through broken minds and unreliable narrators who we can't trust. And they often show us representation of mental illness and create our understanding of mental illness, whether that's right or wrong. So just on this slide here, in the top right corner, we've got a film called The Congress, in which Robin Wright's character takes drugs as the film goes on and becomes a comic book character in a comic book world. We understand her mind through what we see. Fight Club, without giving anything away, is a film that depends entirely on an understanding of psychology to make its meaning in the last 10 minutes or so when it has its twist. Shutter Island is set on an asylum. The more you understand about whether the character is sane or insane, the more you understand about the film. American Psycho is about a yuppie who may or may not be a psychopath. And Lost Highway may or may not be reality, or it may be entirely in a guy's mind in a prison. We don't know. And yet all of these things change what we think about the mind and change what we think about mental illness. Political readings consider political or social views being shown in the film. How do liberals view things? How do conservatives view things? How does it present the mainstream? Is the mainstream present positively or negatively? How does it present alternative points of view, positively or negatively? How do political groups view the film? How do religious groups view it? Bowling for Columbine is about guns in America. Life of Brian. how do conservatives view the funniest comedy ever made about religion? Juno is one of the most popular conservative films in the States about teenage pregnancy. How weird is that? Commando in the 1980s was a war film where one guy took on an entire army, made right in the middle of one of the most conservative political eras in American history. And Forrest Gump is about a guy who, by just accepting the world that he sees, he goes on to have wonderful experiences. Why don't you accept the world you see? Why do you keep challenging things, you terrible hippie? And so on. So different political views change the meanings of the films. Historical perspectives consider the film where they sat in terms of history. So Casablanca was made as a World War II propaganda film. The Day the Earth Stood Still was an anti-war film where aliens came and threatened to destroy Earth if we didn't stop developing nuclear weapons. Ditto Godzilla, ditto Doctor Strangelove, ditto When the Wind Blows. So, you see the political era changes the meaning of the film. Semiotic readings are about the symbols used in texts and how the symbols change the meaning of the films. So, for example, in the most recent Superman film, we had Superman flying in the air in a cross shape. Why? Because Super Jesus. He's, giving up his life, giving up his humanity to save the world. Oh, right. I've heard that story before. If you take a look at Captain America, the man is literally dressed in the American flag. The symbol is the American flag. He is everything good about America. It probably wouldn't surprise you to know that Captain America was originally developed as a propaganda weapon for the American military. The helix in Gattaca, the idea of the double helix symbol of DNA in Gattaca, has a very specific meaning in that if you have the borrowed ladder of somebody else's DNA, you can move up in society. And so that symbol becomes a really important symbol in the film. And in the film Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, Joel's slowly having his memories erased, and his memories, his identities that make him up, are slowly disappearing. And the way that's done creates a way that we think about memories and that we think about ourselves and we think about the way we process information. So as you think about the different ways that the different films present information, you get different understandings of the world and different understandings of the film that those things are in. And depending on which one of these filters you view the film through, you get a different understanding of the film. If you watch the film from a gender perspective or a symbol perspective or from the auteur perspective, you'll make a different reading and you'll understand a different meaning of the film. We're going to look at this in detail with the film American Beauty.